Caution, the following video may contain offensive content. Viewer discretion is advised, especially among children, family members, and future employers. Enjoy.
Hey there, I'm Dalton, aka Punk Monkey Dynamite, formerly known as the Humble Gamer, formerly known as Edgar Allan Poe for show. It's late October and the season of spooks is well underway. I'm pretty excited, to be honest, and to get into the Halloween spirit, I picked up this collection of hidden object games for $1. That means they're all of pretty high quality, right? Well, even the cheesiest of horror movies have some merit, so let's just dive in and take a look. But beware, just might get spooky. I have to admit that I'm not too familiar with the hidden object game genre, but remember those elementary school worksheets where you had to find the differences between two pictures or circle hidden items on a coloring book page? Well, these games are basically that on a computer screen. This is about as casual as gaming can get. The disc I bought includes 6 hidden object games, and after installation, it left a bunch of unwanted crap on my desktop. Come on, look at all that shit! As you'd expect, each of the games is based on the central concept of finding a list of hidden items on screen, but the way in which you do so varies from game to game. Simpler games like Journey of Hope offer little variety and just have the player endlessly discovering hidden objects in multiple locations. You found all the missing items? Congratulations! Now you can find more on a different background. How exciting. However, most of these games attempt to change how the puzzles work, so in addition to clicking hidden objects on screen, you may have to solve additional logic puzzles in order to unlock certain items or clues that are instrumental in accessing the next area or progressing the story. And yes, most of these games attempt to tell a story. Typically, the player's goal is to complete the in-game puzzles in order to solve a mystery or continue the narrative, though the stories these games try to portray are usually nothing in depth. In the aforementioned Journey of Hope, you're a woman whose father has gone missing. He was a museum curator of some kind, and now you must solve the mystery of his disappearance. Yet all you do is rummage through rooms full of junk like you're on an episode of Hoarders. What's that? Some teenagers misplaced some items in the museum? Sure thing, dude. I'll drop the search for my missing father and take care of that right away. In Mountain Crime Requital, you assume the role of a doctor who is on his way to treat a patient staying at a creepy hotel. But on the way there, lightning strikes some rocks, they tumble down, destroying the bridge you're driving across, and we barely make it out alive. Can we see that again? Majestic. Afterwards, we determine that a raven sitting on the car door may be too heavy and might cause our car to tumble down the ravine. So we throw a fucking rock at it and proceed to dig through the contents of the passenger seat to find our doctor's bag before the car collapses into the abyss. We then reach the hotel where we're given the task of getting the power back up and running by solving a series of puzzles. First up is a hidden object puzzle in which we find the pieces required to fix this faucet. Once we find the pieces and stop the water flow, we're able to pick up a button that matches an electrical box on the side of the house, where we must now press the buttons in the right order to open it, only to find out that we need to find the fuses to activate the power. We find the fuses, turn on the power, and proceed into the hotel, where we find another hidden object puzzle. Upon completion, we're rewarded with a guest registry that lists the room number of our missing patient. This is the basic formula used by most of these hidden object games. There's an obvious goal or task to complete, but first we must solve the puzzle in the right order to obtain the specific items necessary to continue forward. Okay, so before we get to the main event, I just have one more game to show you because I seriously cannot resist talking about this one. So this is Behind the Reflection. Is that creepy woman stalking those people, or is that just one of those motion sensor Halloween decorations? The game begins with a cutscene of a mother and son going on a stroll, or at least paper cutouts of the mother and son. I like taking walks with you, Mom. Yeah, some real natural conversation going on here. After bouncing along for a moment, they stop to take a break. The mother's phone rings, and she lets the kid go play in front of a stranger's house. Ugh, parents these days. And then, uh-oh, some crazy shit must be going down. Better go check on the kid. Come on, how am I supposed to take that shit seriously? And get this, the loading screen is the kid stuck in the mirror. F***ing perfect. We asked the guy in front of the house what happened, and he responds in a way that's not too different from how I would have answered. I'm not a nanny.
Hey, it ain't my f***ing kid, lady. How's about you stay off your phone for 2 f***ing seconds? Maybe this shit wouldn't have happened, huh?
The astute gentleman informs us that someone inside may know about our child's disappearance, but first we have to fix the doorbell to gain entry. Naturally, we have to find hidden items in order to repair it. Once inside, we meet this nice old woman who asks us to find our misplaced medicine bottles, most of which are lying around in plain sight. But tell me one thing, Grandma, what the kind of shit were you up to in order for your meds to get up here? She must have thrown a real rager for that shit to happen. That brings us to our feature presentation, if you will, Brink of Consciousness, Dorian Gray Syndrome. This is the game that's prominently displayed on the front cover. Surely we can expect to locate some missing items, but how does it measure up to the rest of the games we've talked about so far? Let's first analyze the title. The term Dorian Gray Syndrome refers to a real-life societal phenomenon in which a man's extreme pride and narcissism prevent him from being able to cope with the realities of aging. The psychological disorder, of course, gets its name from Oscar Wilde's novel The Picture of Dorian Gray, in which the protagonist of the same name sells his soul, so to speak, in order to pursue a life of sexual gratification and debauchery. As a result, a portrait of Gray ages and becomes disfigured with each cruel act he commits, while Gray himself remains eternally handsome and youthful in appearance. As for Brink of Consciousness, I think this is the first game in the series. From what I can tell, there's another one called The Lonely Hearts Murders, but I can't find much information about these games. I know that they were developed by an Eastern European company called Magicindie, but that's about it. Evidently, I have the collector's edition, which by itself goes for about $9.99 on Steam. Taking into consideration that I paid $1 for 6 games on a single disc, my copy of Dorian Gray Syndrome only cost me about 17 cents with tax. The beginning cutscene introduces our protagonist, Sam Wilde, sitting on a couch watching a television broadcast. Sam is a crime journalist for the local paper and has uncovered a great deal of information about a series of disappearances. The television reporter acknowledges Sam's accomplishments and encourages anyone who knows more about the kidnappings to call the police. While watching the news coverage, Sam gets a congratulatory phone call from his newspaper editor, asking Sam to obtain more information and write another article. Sam, however, tells him that he's got a date and rides off on his motorcycle. He arrives to pick up his date, at the docks, I guess, but discovers a note telling him that his girlfriend Anna is the latest kidnapping victim, that Sam has uncovered too much about the disappearances, and if he wants to see Anna alive again, he will go to Goldvale Manor and tell no one. This leads us to the first playable screen of the game, where the killer addresses us over a loudspeaker and welcomes us to his home. Here, we must play a sadistic game by solving various puzzles in order to track him down and rescue Anna. We learned through our loudspeaker interactions that the killer's name is Oscar, an obvious reference to the author Oscar Wilde, and that he has a particular interest in art. That's where the disappearances of young people fit into our story.
Isn't he beautiful? Have you ever seen anything like him? Surely not. I am the only artist in the whole world who creates like this.
So Oscar is obviously fascinated with outward beauty and makes art installations of his victims in order to give them the gift of immortality and preserve their youth for an eternity. He does so by using various embalming methods, giving each installation a theme fitting of the victim's personality or an ideology that Oscar holds true. As the story unfolds, Sam learns that Oscar has also made showpieces from people within his own life. For instance, one of Oscar's installations is a former mechanic who betrayed his trust by having an affair with his girlfriend. Both she and the mechanic paid the price by becoming 2 of Oscar's creations, along with a butler and another woman Oscar had loved. With each new victim, we learn a little more about Oscar. For instance, the second woman Oscar fell in love with rejected him, and as a result, he immortalized her in a walk-in freezer, saying that the cold is where the icy heart of a woman belongs. Oscar also tries to project his cynical views onto Sam, constantly asking him whether his pursuit of Anna is even worth it, that like the woman that hurt him, she will only betray Sam in the long run.
Do you think your Anna is true to you? We'll find out soon.
Every time we discover a new victim, he seizes the opportunity to convince Sam of the malevolent nature of the world and teach some sort of existential life lesson. Although Sam finds the art pieces in a seemingly random order, you can see the natural progression of Oscar's work. His first few victims were merely revenge killings, while he eventually attempted to pull off more abstract ideas when making his creations. He even discusses different artistic methods and creative concepts to Sam over the loudspeaker, who really has no choice but to listen to his wild ramblings.
I always thought that true art is a part of infinity, of eternity. Do you think I'm wrong?
After debating it amongst himself towards the latter part of the game, Oscar decides to try a new art form in which he intends to capture a single fleeting moment, as opposed to his other compositions in which he carefully poses and decorates his victims. As a result, Oscar poisons a room full of house guests he invited over under the false pretense of a homemade whiskey tasting party, all of which we only hear over the loudspeaker, unfortunately, in a pitch-black room no less. However, Oscar is very unhappy with the results of his experiment.
And they call this the art. Oh, now I ruin so many beautiful showpieces, and I will never forgive myself for that.
We're also able to learn more about Oscar's background through snippets of journal entries Sam finds throughout the manor. These entries include his initial love of embalming and details of a rough childhood. To be honest, I actually enjoyed Oscar's personality. Despite being a murderous psychopath, he has a decent sense of humor.
You probably thought you were digging up something more interesting, like a corpse.
One of the highlights of the game is when he decides to perform a campy radio drama he's written over the loudspeaker he uses to communicate with Sam.
Darling, I'm home.
He forces Anna to play his wife and read the lines he's prepared for her. It's actually pretty entertaining in my opinion. Oscar gets really into the performance, which is a stark contrast to how Anna reluctantly reads her lines.
My dear, have you seen the sauce I made this morning?
Oh, I thought that it was dog food, so I fed them with it.
How could you do that? I was cooking all morning.
All around, I'd have to say that the voice acting is pretty good. It's all fairly convincing, but Oscar definitely steals the show. The worst performance, however, is probably from our hero Sam. He only speaks in the beginning cutscene, and it sounds to me like an American guy forcing an English accent.
I never hoped that you'd call me just to congratulate, without any buts.
Also, throughout the game, we occasionally hear him react to Oscar's deviant behavior through angered grunts and groans. It's actually kind of embarrassing.
I would ask Anna, but unfortunately, she can't answer questions anymore.
Brink of Consciousness, Dorian Gray Syndrome shines pretty bright in the puzzle-solving department as well. The variety of puzzles is actually pretty huge. You of course have the sections where you have to find hidden objects on a cluttered screen, but that's just a portion of the gameplay. I feel Dorian Gray Syndrome draws inspiration from point-and-click adventure games of the 90s. There's an inventory system, and you'll often have to backtrack to previous areas with an item you found some considerable time after first encountering the puzzle it belongs to. There were also times where I found my inventory filled up with multiple items to unlock a single puzzle, only to find the puzzle and realize I was still missing one or two pieces to unlock it. Even worse, there are puzzles that require additional work after finding all the missing items, such as this one involving billiard balls. After finding and inserting each one of the balls, I still had to complete some sort of math puzzle that I frankly didn't feel like doing. Luckily, there's a skip button. Most of the other hidden object games have this, as well as some sort of hint option. If you happen to be stuck in an area, you can click the hint button and a visual aid will show you a hidden item or clue us in on what we need to do next. It will just take some time for the hint option to become available again. There were some puzzles that were actually somewhat difficult to figure out, but for the most part, later in the game, I was just downright lazy and didn't give a shit, so I'd skip the puzzle entirely. There's really no consequence for doing so either. You still unlock what you need to gain access to the next area. The worst that happened is that Oscar insulted me a few times for taking the easy way out.
Imagine that! You've managed. If I find you've cheated...
But seriously, check this one out. I understand that all I have to do is pull the blocks through the corresponding colors and stack them in the right order, but I don't have the patience for that shit. Skip.
A real man builds a real house. Wimp.
Something else that is pretty common across all the hidden object games is penalties for erratic clicking. To prevent you from finding the hidden items by just clicking around indiscriminately, the games usually freeze the cursor somehow. In Journey of Hope, the mouse swirls around the screen if you click too often. In Mountain Crime Requital, the screen fogs up upon too many clicks. But in Brink of Consciousness, Dorian Gray Syndrome, there is no clicking penalty. So naturally, I clicked all over the screen like a lazy douchebag. These limited penalties, or lack thereof, probably make you think that beating this game was a cakewalk. Well, prepare yourself, because what I'm about to tell you pretty much establishes that as long as you have the time to kill, this game is practically unlosable. You ready for this? The game provides its own f***ing walkthrough. Yeah, the guide button at the bottom left is literally a full strategy guide that gives you step-by-step instructions to solving every puzzle, to finding every hidden object, to completing the entire game. Prima ain't got shit on Dorian Gray Syndrome. So I'll quickly wrap up the puzzles so I can show you the end of the game. Two that stand out in my mind is one where you have to tune a guitar to obtain a key, and another one in which you have to match these puppets with an accessory that best fits what they're doing. Once they are matched with the appropriate prop, they come to life in this cool stop animation and the next area is unlocked. There were also a few that I thought to be a bit impractical. At one point, we come across Oscar's pet cobra blocking our path. After finding a net and catching it, it becomes one of our inventory items. Yeah, try that one out. Try catching a venomous snake and then shoving it in a backpack with a bunch of our other crap. We put the cobra in its own special bathtub where it swims through a pipe and into a larger pool of water. Did we unlock the Chamber of Secrets while we were at it? For our troubles, we're rewarded with a new puzzle piece. A few times in the story, Oscar actually appeared in person. However, he was almost always just taunting us behind one of his homemade traps. As a result, shutting down a fire trap or turning off giant saw blades would immediately become the game's main focus. There was even a time where he saves us from drowning.
You don't get to die that way. I have other plans.
This leaves our hero Sam quite puzzled. Oscar's plans become apparent at the end of the game when we finally unlock the door that leads to Oscar's hideout. He taunts us one last time, encouraging Sam to follow the light at the end of the tunnel. Sam takes the bait like a dummy, and it doesn't quite work out for him. We awaken in Oscar's lab inside a glass chamber, finally face to face with our assailant. He informs us that everything has gone according to plan and that Sam and Anna will become his next exhibits, his greatest masterpiece yet. As Oscar blabs on about his devious plan, the chamber slowly fills with embalming liquid, tinting our world in green, partially obstructing our view as we witness the game's Deus Ex Machina ending. Oh my god, Anna, what has he done to you? Oh, I'm sorry, that's not some sort of disfiguration, that's just your poorly rendered face. But for a moment, can we just back up a bit? So did Oscar not have the common sense to strap Anna down in case she happened to wake up? And it just so happens that the anesthesia wore off at the exact moment Sam was about to drown in embalming fluid? Anesthesia? More like Anna hits you over the head with a lead pipe, am I right? We see an image of Oscar at the bottom of the well, melodramatically move his hand a quarter of an inch. And then the game ends similarly to how it began, with Sam watching news coverage of Oscar's deeds. Only this time, the Barbie doll reporter is describing Sam's struggle to escape the mansion and informs the public that Oscar's whereabouts are unknown. This is where the game should have ended, but instead we're given a cutscene of Oscar breaking into an abandoned amusement park 2 weeks later. That tease ending sets us up for the bonus chapter included in the collector's edition of Dorian Gray Syndrome. The setup is that Sam's editor calls him 3 months later to investigate a murder that supposedly happened at the amusement park, but upon Sam's arrival, he discovers he's yet again in the clutches of Oscar. I admit that the amusement park setting offers a ton of opportunities for unique puzzle solving, but I feel the story should have just ended after Anna's rescue from the mansion. I only played a little bit of the bonus chapter before deciding to quit. To be honest, I actually enjoyed Brink of Consciousness Dorian Gray Syndrome. As far as hidden object games go, this one has a lot of variety and effort put into it. The overall atmosphere is pretty spooky thanks to the eerie music and the amazing artwork. I'm pretty sure that each of the environments is hand-drawn, and I have to admit that they're damn good looking. However, the pre-rendered cutscenes can be a little rough around the edges. Sam looks a little bit like a Ken doll, but they were able to hide this most of the time by keeping him in shadow or not staying on his face for too long. For the most part, I believe they were making the best with what they had. None of it's really too distracting, until we finally see Anna. Poor Anna. In my opinion, Oscar was the highlight of the game. I loved his personality. He was oftentimes making off-color jokes at Sam's expense, but at the same time, he could be intimidating and wrathful.
Watch out! If you scratch my car, I will scratch you know who. Don't tempt fate.
He was also lucky enough for his face not to be shown. Since he was always wearing a mask, I didn't have the disappointment of seeing a poorly rendered expression that didn't quite match his personality. I can only assume that the developers thought Oscar would be a fan favorite as well. The collector's edition that I'm playing also includes artwork for you to check out in the extras section. Like other games, there is concept art on display and even includes some wallpapers you can download. However, there's also a section called Unknown Oscar. This contains a series of drawings that depict Oscar engaging in a variety of activities, such as standing in line at a bakery, shaving, and even landing on the moon. They're all drawn in this sort of fan art style. It just makes me wonder if Magicindie thought that Oscar would gain some sort of cult following. I certainly found him enjoyable enough. I guess the question is whether or not I would recommend Brink of Consciousness Dorian Gray Syndrome. Well, I actually had a pretty decent time playing it actually. But to be honest, if I hadn't already planned on making a video about it, I probably wouldn't have given it the time of day. I guess it just goes to show that you should never be too set in your own ways. But after playing this, I intend on taking a look at some other hidden object games, just for the fact that I enjoy—